Hello everyone, I am Shane12088 here with another perfectly unscientific gaming review, and this time we're going to be looking at the Crossfield Science Spearhead Refit Tier 6, otherwise known as the 32nd Century Discovery. The ship came out today in the recent House United series and the Far Away From Home lockbox, and we're going to have a look at an exotic particle generator build in it. We're also going to have a bit of a look at what the weapons that come with the ship look like and what the consoles do right now in a patrol.
Heads up! An Alati fleet just dropped out of warp.
So before we start off, this ship as a science spearhead has 4 forward weapons, 3 aft weapons, 2 universal consoles because it's tier 6X. It would have 1 universal console normally, but I have since upgraded it to the tier 6X version. It is a Miracle Worker primary ship. It also has 3 engineering consoles, 5 science consoles, and 3 tactical consoles. Its trait is a rather interesting one. Universal designs when activating Universal Console. Lasts for 20 seconds, stacks 5 times. Gives you 2% critical chance and 10% critical severity each time you activate it. Now, as for the console that comes from the ship itself here, it's the Kwejian assault craft. It gives us a boost to HP, outgoing healing, reduces cooldown on our Miracle Worker bridge officer abilities, and launches the ship that acts as a pet. We'll have a look at that and the weapon visuals later on. Now, of course, you're probably wondering, how is this ship set up? Well, it's running a bread and butter exotic particle generator build with the gravimetric photon torpedo from the Dyson rep, the particle emission plasma torpedo from the Science R&D School. Just pause if you want a bit more of a preview of what the tooltips do. Dark matter quantum torpedo from the Discovery Reputation set, and the phaser wide-angle dual heavy beam bank, also from the Discovery Reputation, because of the 2-piece set bonus that gives us a critical severity buff when we crit. Stacks up to 25 times, so that means 25% critical severity. For our deflector, impulse, warp, and shield set, we're running the revolutionary set that enables the Imperial Rifts through House Mokai Science, gives us a boost to EPG, critical severity, turn rate, and all damage resistance rating to forward foes. We also have the weaponized mycelial ray that says it does 131k, but it does a lot more than that. You'll see that in the Parse down below. And then also we have a 3.8% critical chance boost, increased damage on the Rift, increased Rift duration, and the Rift can bring in Alachi ships, interestingly enough. This is our secondary deflector, standard deteriorating secondary deflector, spec'd into control, and EPG also gives us a boost to damage when we activate our sensor analysis. In the back, we are running Nukara web mines because this ship can run Dispersal Pattern Beta 2, and the Nukara web mines have a hold ability, which synergizes with the console from the most recent event, the Tholian Web Spinner Array, that boosts physical, tetrion, and control expertise, but it also allows for attacks against held foes to gain 50 bonus damage. We'll go through the active of the console in just a little bit. We're also running the Ultimate Plasma Omni because of the 1% critical chance it gives, but it also, when it crits, gives a debuff against any kind of plasma damage, which is useful for our Plasma Storm module that comes off of the Maquis Raider that swirls a big orange swirling cloud in front of us. Then we have the Dyson Proton weapon that synergizes with the Gravimetric Torpedo for extra photon damage and 3% critical chance. Other consoles we're running are the Tachyokinetic Converter for control expertise, turn rate, crit, and critical severity. We also have the Multi-Target Tractor Arrays, which is a nice damage attack, and it in itself actually does a good amount of DPS. On the tin, you wouldn't normally think so, but all these universal consoles stack up to do some quite immaculate work. We also have the Constriction Anchor, which gives us 25.3 bonus exotic damage, the Delphic Tear, which gives us bonus exotic damage and critical severity, and the Oxyjection Assembly from the Kelvin Timeline Lockbox ship or Legendary ship that also gives us bonus exotic damage. The Delphic Tear and Constriction Anchor can come from the Infinity Choice Pack. We also have an Exotic Particle Field Exciter. It rolled to the EPG version, gives us 75 EPG. The Neutronic Eddy Generator from the Ryza Weather Control Ship. These spawn big purple clouds that do a lot of damage, perhaps perhaps more than they should, but that's a topic for a different day. The Web Spinner Array that, when we activate it, activates chained web protection, and this does an insane amount of DPS. It was actually quite surprising to see another EPG console added to the game, but it encases your target in Tholian web and does lots of damage. The Temporal Vortex Probe gives us a boost to exotic damage, turn rate, and reduces temporal powers, which we don't have any of today, but this console also puts forward a nice anomaly that deals damage. I already talked about the Plasma Storm module from the Maquis Raider. The Fakiri Torment engine comes from one of the most recent Klingon missions. I'm blanking on the name right now. I'll put it up on the screen in post. So the Fakiri Torment engine, I mentioned where it came from, but it also increases non-hazard damage over time, increases fire, radiation, plasma, and physical damage, and there's also a chance to do a dot when we deal non-hazard damage over time damage, and that dot that it deals is 2,000 fire damage per second for 5 seconds. And then we have the cascading gravimetric disruptions that come from the Earhart Sea Store ship. I got that wrong in the last video, but it's the Earhart, and the fleet angle is the fleet version. Then the Bioneural Infusion Circuits, a Lobi console that gives us a boost to critical severity. Now, in terms of actual Starship traits, we have Improved Photonic Officer from the Tholian Ectomi that boosts exotic damage, in our case, shield healing and hull healing, but we're most interested in the exotic boost plus the duration extension. The trait from the ship that I already talked about. Improved Gravity Well from the Science Andorian. Ceaseless Momentum from the Infinity Choice Pack. Before, you used to have to get it off a ship. This one might be replaced in the future, but whenever we fire torpedoes, it boosts kinetic damage, which also has this added benefit of boosting our gravity wells. Spore-infused anomalies, which on this build is triggering off of Gravity Well, Very Cold in Space, and Subspace Vortex. And then assimilated power conduits from the Tal Shiar battlecruiser. We activate emergency-powered auxiliary. We had a 5% critical chance boost and 25% critical severity boost for 20 seconds. Other interesting things power-wise that we're running, I already talked about most of these. We have Delayed Overload Cascade, which is something you have to be very careful with when you're activating in some runs, because if you don't have adequate control, you'll send everything flying over the map. So it does do a lot of damage, but just be careful when you use it. Our Destabilizing Resonance Beam, our Tachyon Beam, and Charged Particle Burst are all for activating that secondary deflector, which, as you can see here, unbuffed, does 11.3k radiation damage. Now, other things that we might want to talk about here: hazard emitters, just to cleanse and heal, chemosite-laced weaponry, torpedo spread 2, and dispersal pattern beta 3 or beta 2 rather, for our Nukara web mines that do a good amount of damage and also hold the target, which I think is giving us some bonus damage on that. Other traits that we have are resonating payload modifications. Whenever we fire torpedoes, we debuff physical and kinetic resistance rating, which is good because we're doing a lot of kinetic damage, and our physical damage comes from some of our universal consoles as well. So that's a very important trait to plug in. We have unconventional systems, and as I mentioned in the Kwejian cat video, this one makes the exotic particle generator builds that are synchronized with universal consoles sing, because it reduces the recharge of those consoles by 7% every time we activate a control ability, which today here is Gravity Well and Very Cold in Space. We might look at replacing something else with maybe a tractor beam to get another control in, but I felt everything was coming off cooldown all right. Inspirational Leader: whenever we activate a bridge officer power, 10% chance to boost Starship skills by 10, stacks 3 times. Terran targeting systems just gives us a blanket 15% critical severity, but slows us down if we're hit by a crit. Context is for kings. If you're running with a tank, this is a 10% bonus all damage buff, or if you're not, you get a resistance buff. And Particle Manipulator: this is the trait that makes EPG builds sing. It comes from the science R&D school. It is a trait that gives critical hit chance and critical hit severity for exotic abilities based on your EPG skill. You can see we max this out at 50% for the critical hit chance, and we're getting 30.7 critical hit severity on this, meaning we have 307 total EPG skill. Next, we have Adaptive Offense, which gives us 2.7% critical hit chance, but when we crit, it converts that into critical severity, subtracts 0.9% each time for a max of 9% critical severity. Then we have Conservation of Energy, which is a Science Captain trait. Gives us a 10% bonus on exotic damage powers when we are hit by energy. Weapon stacks 3 times. And then Fleet Coordinator, 2% bonus all damage per team member, stacks up to 10%. Space Reputation, we have critical severity from the Dyson rep, critical chance from the Discovery rep and Tyler's Duality, Particle Generator Amplifier, which gives us bonus exotic from the Iconian rep, critical hit chance from the Romulan rep, and Nukara Auxiliary Power Offense. So with that, this is what the skill tree looks like on this build. It has a heavy tack focus. I might change some of this around to be a little bit less tack heavy, but it works and I'm happy with it. So you can just give that a pause if you want to see more of that. Specialization wise, we have Temporal Primary, gives us a nice 50 EPG boost, but it also gives us Entropic Rider and 10% all damage buff for space damage over time effects, going up to 20% if you fully spec that node out. Also debuffs the target, and it's also got a fun little thing down here in continuity where if you get damaged too much, it acts as kind of a little oopsie reset. It'll teleport you backwards and give you a nice HP boost. So Temporal is pretty good primary spec for anything that runs exotic particle generator builds. And our secondary is Strategist, which on its own, the main reason we like this is the diversionary tactics. When we're not threatening, it placates foes, but it also gives us a boost to hull regen rate and gives us a bonus all damage per affected foe for 10 seconds, max 5, so that's an extra 15% right there. And then this one is also interesting here. Logistical support gives us critical chance boost for 10 seconds when we're not threatening, but were healed by bridge officer and captain abilities. And if you really go down deeper into this, it also gives a critical severity buff as well. All right, let's move on to the duty officers. So our duty officers for this one is an energy weapons officer that gives us a critical severity buff when firing energy weapons. I think we might be better off in this case moving it to a projectile weapons officer that does the same thing, or one of the numbered Borg officers that are prohibitively expensive. But if you watched any of the past videos, you'll note that most of what I do is I try to do it on a budget. We have 2 technicians here that have a chance at increasing exotic damage when using emergency power to auxiliary. 25% bonus exotic damage for 10 seconds, a 10% chance to have that fire off, and that's going to roll twice. We have a gravimetric scientist that has a chance at creating aftershock gravity wells. We also have a chance to place 8 targets when we use charged particle bursts. This is in here because still sometimes in runs and missions when you're alone and you don't have a tank, these builds do draw a lot of threats. So it's just something that I've worked into this, and there are other options out there, as I mentioned, such as the numbered Borg officers that would make this duty officer setup more combat focused, but this is, I feel, a good mixed bag for the way that I build. And then we have a Xindi biochemist, has a 10% chance of negative 50% threat generation for 10 seconds. So with that said, let's have a look at the run and the parse.
Scanning the nanite transformer. Gone. There's no data available.
Technological and biological distinctiveness.
The nanite drones can repair the transformer. Stop them! A probe is closing in on a transformer. Destroy it!
All right, so let's have a look at the parse now. Starting off, the deteriorating secondary deflector did about 94k DPS. Delayed overload cascade, 75k, but remember the caution with that one, you got to watch where you fire that off as to not toss too many things about the map. Gravity well did 45k. And we have pets at about 45k as well, and if we break down the pets, that includes our cryonic turbulence, the neutronic eddy, and Badlands Cyclone, plus the rift from the mycelial weapon. Then, from there, we have our spore-infused anomalies, chained web projection from the Tholian console. Our particle emission plasma torpedo clouds did 31k DPS. Stabilizing resonance beam did 20k. Temporal vortex 15k. Our web mines did 13.4. And the mycelial weapon itself did 11.9k with a single shot of 1.3 million. Then we have Subspace Vortex, more spore-infused anomalies, our gravimetric rifts, the Delphic Tear, and the Fakiri Torment engine with its dot that we talked about earlier in the show. Following from that, it kind of just splits itself down. I don't know that there's too much else to mention on here. Entropic Rider, Drain Infection, gravimetric disruptions. This could have been cast a bit better than it was, and you'll see this in the way that it happened during the run. So this wasn't by far a perfect run in any effect, but it gets the point across that this is a potent platform for exotic particle generator builds, and as always, 595k. You don't need really more than 100k for elite, so don't worry too much about the numbers, but this just shows the concept in terms of how it works. So that was the Tier 6 Crossfield Science Spearhead Refit, otherwise known as the 32nd century Discovery. Bread and butter science exotic particle generator build. I enjoyed flying the ship. I don't think it'll displace me from the Verne or Tier 6 Wells permanently, but its trait seems pretty good, and that'll be working its way into other builds. And this ship is so versatile that we might see it crop up again on the channel in the future. But nonetheless, if you have any questions, please do leave them below. Or if you have any build suggestions, please do feel free to put those in as well. And if this video is at all useful, like and subscribe. See you next time.